Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan Baumgart, the CEO of Atomic Consulting. Today I'd like to speak with you about FX regulation throughout the European Union. Great. So what we'll do today is cover FX regulation in Europe. I'm going to discuss three key regions that you should know about, or at least come up the most in discussions about Forex regulation in the European Union. Before I get into those, though, it's important to understand what Mifid 2 is. Now, that's a mouthful. I'm going to define it for you in a moment. But basically, Mifid stands for Markets in Financial Instruments Directive, which is a lot, and I'm not so clever to have that memorized. I even wrote it down myself on a piece of paper here because it's hard to remember. And 2 refers to the second instance or version of it. Now, what Mifid 2 is was a pan-European directive mostly designed or built in the wake of the financial crisis that took place around 2007, 2008. As a result of that, the European Union wanted to improve regulation throughout Europe. So they created more of a pan-European framework that would apply to all EU member states. So you can maybe understand why I'm bringing this up first, because the regions I discuss will basically have the same requirements with very little difference between them because they're all following MiFID II guidelines. Now, I won't bore you with all the details of MiFID II, but as it applies to Forex and CFD trading, what it did was bring about a higher level of regulation than previously existed in the European Union. So examples included more reporting, which can be viewed as positive because it provides more transparency of the broker to the regulators. So they know more about it, and they can better assess if a broker is doing something that perhaps goes against their rules or they don't like. Also, deposit bonuses were one thing that went away. The regulators in Europe felt that this was detrimental to clients or encouraged churning or too aggressive trading, which ended up not being in the favor of clients. It's not allowed in Europe, but in other regulatory jurisdictions it still is. And another example is enhanced KYC, which stands for Know Your Client. So this means that in order to open a trading account with an EU-regulated broker, you would require more documents, more due diligence than previously needed. This is both to protect the integrity of the broker and also to make sure that the proper clients are qualified to trade. So that's a very, very brief overview, but just enough so you can understand how FX regulation in Europe works. It's all basically governed by this foundation of MiFID II. So now I'll briefly discuss some of the most interesting regions. Many of them you won't hear about only because they either regulate zero brokers, meaning they don't oversee any FX brokers, or a handful. I'm going to just discuss the most popular. So the first I'll bring up is Bulgaria. Bulgaria has its own local regulator, like all places in Europe. It's the FSC. In terms of why this region may be attractive compared to Cyprus, which we'll discuss, and other regions, it has lower costs in terms of office space, staff, and the overall running of the business. Taxes are also quite competitive there as well. Now, with that said, over the past few years, Bulgaria really hasn't become an ideal jurisdiction in Europe for the simple fact that only a handful of brokers, if that many, are licensed there. So if you wanted to get a license in Bulgaria, our team can do it. However, we would really need to understand your needs. That would be a much more in-depth discussion because it's not really an ideal region anymore. However, it does come up in conversation, so that's why I wanted to highlight it in this video. If you wanted to talk about it more, as mentioned, then feel free to reach out to us. So the next region is Malta. Now, unlike Bulgaria, there are far more brokers regulated in Malta, but not a ton. The biggest reason, I would say, is that it simply takes far too long to apply for a license from the beginning and receive approval. This makes Malta not such an attractive region. It once used to be a very interesting hub for cryptocurrencies, but even then it's kind of died out in popularity. There's been a lot of banking challenges. So it's a common request that we often receive is many brokers who are regulated in other places have asked specifically about Malta. Similar to Bulgaria, if your firm absolutely wants to do it, we are happy to help you out, but we need to have an in-depth discussion and also set the expectations about the region since, as mentioned, the time for approval is quite lengthy, even as far as the EU goes. Which leads me to the final region in today's video, which is none other than Cyprus. So I saved the best for last. That's because Cyprus is the de facto region for FX regulation throughout the European Union. There simply isn't a place that has more approved licenses than Cyprus. And perhaps in a future video, I'll go over the reasons why. It just happened to evolve as a place for FX broker licensing, but it's now become a globally recognized region for FX broker licenses. Anyone who's visited Cyprus, you can't even leave the airport without seeing ads for brokers. I mean, it's really the FX hub, I would say, of the European Union. So with that in mind, I'll briefly explain what the bare bones requirements are. Keep in mind that I'm just breezing through this. We can definitely provide consultation if you'd like to explore this in more detail. You definitely have to have an office if you'd like to get a license anywhere in Europe. I think this goes without saying. And the guidelines, getting back to Mifid 2, are quite strict. You need to have a fairly seasoned group of executives running the broker. It's not impossible to take complete outsiders, i.e. those with no financial background or experience, but generally speaking, those who are responsible for the operations need to have a proven background. So you need to have a fairly decent executive staff. You also need to have some other staff members as well. Basically, you have to prove to CySEC, the regulator, that this is a sizable business that is looking to grow because frankly, it's a very competitive region. There's many brokers that are regulated there, and if you want to keep up, you have to prove, to the regulator that you have the minimum requirements. In terms of capital, this is set across Europe. For STP, I'll just use the colloquial term, it's 125,000 euros, and then the capital for market making is 730,000 euros. Now, there's one thing unique to Cyprus, which is called a fast track. This is something interesting. Basically, brokers who wish to expedite the application process have the opportunity to participate in CySEC's fast track examination speed. Basically, for a fee of 25,000 euros, you can have the application pushed ahead or accelerated. It's perfectly legal. Cyprus, or better said, the Cyprus authorities, CySIC, allows for this. If you're interested in exploring that or learning more about it, we can help you. And I would say in general, if you wanted to dig more into Cyprus, I've barely scratched the surface. There's a lot more to discuss, such as the costs, insurance, regulatory fees, timelines, etc. All of that our team of consultants can assist you with. The main purpose of today's video is just to give you a very basic overview of how European Union regulation works when it comes to FX trading. So I hope this introduction video was helpful. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe to our channel so that you can be informed of any videos to come, and we'll have a few other useful links in the description section. Otherwise, I wish to thank you for your time today and look forward to speaking with you soon. Bye.